Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outlier YouTube channel and our show, Get to Know. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Kathleen Antrim.
And I am Kathleen Antrim, as Doug just said, and I am so excited to welcome our guest today. We've got Laura McHugh. Honestly, she has won so many awards with her thrillers, which are absolutely riveting. I'm not even going to list them all because it would take up most of the show. I will mention, however, that one of her books was Harlan Coben's best thriller for the summer on the Today Show. And Oprah Daly is also, she was like one of the best thriller reads of the year. Welcome, Laura. It's great to have you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm
Oh my
excited.
gosh. You know, I love your mind. It is thoroughly demented. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Only in the thriller world would that be a compliment, right?
Right, yeah.
So I have a question because I have a theory about this, and that is, tell us a little bit about your childhood and how you think your childhood might have contributed to you becoming a writer.
Yeah, I'm the youngest of 8 kids, and we moved down to the Ozarks when I was a little kid and lived in the middle of nowhere. And to me, it was kind of like a real creepy place. I mean, I loved it. It's beautiful down there, but to me, I was always like, what's lurking out there in the woods and the caves and all of that. And so I think that might have had some influence on me in that sense. I just always expecting something creepy to be going on. We lived next to a commune and next to a militia encampment of the Covenant of the Sword and the Arm of the Lord.
Oh,
Way out in
the sword and the arm of the Lord. Wow, interesting.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Interesting influence. So were you a shy child? Were you outgoing? Did you have very many friends? Like in that environment, were you pretty much left to your own devices to entertain yourself? Or, how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, at first there were 8 of us kids. That was great. When we moved down to the Ozarks, I was much younger. I was the youngest, so a lot of them were gone.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, I always had, friends, but I was pretty shy and quiet and just more like observant, just kind of like soaking it all in. But that's come in handy as a writer. I use all that stuff that I like soaked up all that time.
And did you happen to have imaginary friends that you played with?
No, I didn't. I didn't have an imaginary friend. I would imagine scary things. Like I would think I would see like monsters and things like that. But yeah.
So, so like when I was a kid, I used to put myself to bed or to sleep by telling myself a story. And if it was a great story, it would go on for a few nights. But if it was only, not that great, it was a one night stand kind of story. So did you do any of that when you were?
Yeah, I was always writing stories from the time I was like before I could even write. My mom has some story I had dictated to her, to write down for me, which is kind of funny. But all the way back to when I was probably in like junior high, I was writing pretty dark, creepy stories. And I've told this story before, but I turned in a story in 7th grade, and it was about this girl who like murdered her dad when they were out cutting wood, with a chainsaw. And my mom was kind of horrified because I went out cutting wood with my dad like every weekend. And just a little concerned. But I mean, back then you could turn in a story like that and you didn't get called in to the counselor to, discuss.
Yeah, you probably would get called in now.
Yeah, now they would put you in therapy and take you away from the family and all that stuff. Yeah.
For my family.
On medication.
Well, I have to confess that because I've read all of Laura's books, and those of you listening out there, if you haven't, shame on you. But I remember when we met at Thriller Fest when you wrote The Weight of Blood and it was nominated and won the award and all that stuff. But coming up to you and introducing myself and saying you wrote one of the best books I've ever read, and I still believe that. The Weight of Blood, everyone should read. And I think I told you then that I use the first opening paragraph of that when I teach voice because the voice is so captivating. But what I wanted to ask you is, because of that book and your other books, you seem to really get almost in a Joyce Carol Oates kind of way, get deep into family psyches and issues of the interpersonal relationships within families, and they're definitely not the Beaver family. They're not Leave It to Beaver. How did that come from your imagination living in the swamps of the Ozarks or what?
I mean, some of it, yeah. And I mean, I'll probably have to wait till my mom passes away before I tell all the stories of, what influenced me and a lot of that. But yeah, growing up in a large family, and just really observing a lot of things. Yeah, I mean, I was always drawn to like the darkest part of things. And, with crime stories, crimes happening locally where we lived, or like just paying attention to the family dynamics and various things going on. So yeah, that has always fascinated me. And I'm glad you see that in my writing, because I'm really always writing about family at heart and just those complicated bonds. You might love someone who's a horrible person. They might do horrible things, but they might love you and treat you well. And it's very complicated. So I love writing about that.
What I think that's one of the reasons you won so many awards and the reason your writing is so accessible is that the characters are amazing, and you get involved in their lives when at times you want to walk away and say, I don't want to be here. I don't want to read about this, but you do, and you really draw the reader into these angst-filled situations. And you also play with time. You go backwards and forth in time, and that's hard to do. Do you basically have to write two stories and meld them together? Do you outline them? Or does this just come as you're writing?
Yeah, like with The Weight of Blood, that was my first time trying to write a book. And, looking back, if I planned it out, maybe I wouldn't have done, multiple timelines and narrators. But the way that it works, I usually am trying to think of the best way to tell the story. And like in that one, you have Lucy, who's in her own present tense in the present, but her mom's story, she never knew her mom, because her mom disappeared. And I wanted her mother's story to be just as alive and urgent, as Lucy's. And the way that I thought to do that was to have her own timeline, having her in her own present in the past. And so usually I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to tell the story. And obviously, when you play with time, you can kind of use the suspense with that, with going back and forth, and just try to make the most of that. So yeah, that's pretty fun. But sometimes I do have to kind of pull apart the two timelines into separate stories, make sure they flow completely on their own, and then like weave them back together, which sometimes is a little bit tricky. And I'm usually like, why did I do this?
That's tough. I mean, it's really tough.
Well, the beauty of it was that in the present day story, the characters that you hear about or interface with, where they came from. And in the past story, the characters, same character, you see where they're going, because you're kind of learning these two things at the same time in parallel. And when the connections are made, some of them are breathtaking. I mean, it's just like, oh, wow, now I get that. Yeah.
I love that, like trying to tie things together.
Yes.
Like, over time. I really enjoy that.
Like macrame.
So you enjoy making things very difficult on yourself, apparently. You like a challenge.
I do, yeah. I'm always like, past me was awful. She had all these ideas, and then, present me is like, why? But, it's kind of work out.
So what is your process? Do you outline? Are you a pantser, or how do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I started as a pantser. When I wrote The Weight of Blood, I didn't even have a story. I was just writing about the setting, and then I had the main character, and I did not know where the story was going for probably the first half of the book.
Oh, wow.
And I don't recommend that. I don't recommend that. Really, but after that, I tried to be more rigid, like to outline something, because I thought it would go faster, because I had, then I had a deadline, someone actually wanting a book due. But it didn't work well for me to outline really thoroughly either. Really kind of took the joy out of it, because a lot of times my story will just kind of grow organically while I'm writing it, and I have to leave room for that. So I try to know where I'm going. And that might change, but it's pretty important for me to know like where I'm going to end up. What is the journey of this main character? What does that emotional arc, like that kind of thing, look like? And so at least I have something I'm working toward, and it can change as I go, but I try to outline just a little bit more than I used to. Just straight up pantsing, it just makes me a little nervous now, because I'm like, how long will it take me? I don't know. It might go quickly, or it might not. So,
and then you just remain flexible with your outline to change things. And
Oh yeah, very flexible. I don't mind changing stuff as I go. I just kind of want to feel like I have an idea where I'm going. It makes me feel a little better.
Exactly. Well, before we get to your latest book, let's go to the one before that. What can you tell us about What's Done in Darkness?
Yeah, I mean, that one was partly inspired by, living down in the Ozarks, down by the Arkansas border. That's where this book is set. And I got to have a really fun experience with this book that I never got to do before. It was optioned by a really great film company, and the head writer wanted to go down and experience the place where What's Done in Darkness is set. And so we spent a week going down to the Ozarks and like taking them on these crazy roads, crossing creeks, went to a fiddle supper in the middle of nowhere with all these like 100-year-old fiddlers playing. And I mean, it was really, really, really cool experience trying to scare someone from the city with all the Ozarks
Wow.
out in the woods. So that was super fun. But yeah, that book again, it's like family stuff, complicated family things. She comes from a very religious family. And yeah, and it's funny because a lot of that stuff about that crazy fundamentalist like intense religious communities. One of my friends who's a librarian read the book in ARC form before it came out. She's like, "You're writing about my family." She's like, "I grew up like this."
Wow.
It was just super strict. And like in the book, I think the girls' Little House on the Prairie books get taken away because they're a little too, Laura Ingalls is a little too sassy. And my friend, her books got taken away because, they were a bad influence. And it's
Oh my gosh.
just pretty fascinating because I did base it on some real things, obviously, and real experience I've observed of other people. And then to hear people still living like that, it was pretty interesting.
Wait, I understand a lot of your stuff is you do get true crime stories and then kind of twist them from there.
Yeah.
Was this an example? Was there something in that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And without giving too much away, the girl Destiny, who is missing in the beginning, that really happened. That was a story. The girl lived just a few miles from where I lived back in the Ozarks, and it turned out her mother had done something very awful to her. And that was just,
my gosh.
a few years ago, but they didn't end up convicting the mother of murder. Because when a body is destroyed too much, it's hard to prove what happened. But yeah, that was a local case. I read a lot about stuff like crimes that happen in the little towns where I lived.
Wow. I mean, the Ozarks to me is such a great setting for a thriller because that's a scary place. It looks scary. It's, the mountains, the lakes, the woods, a lot of woods.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the crime, like one of the more recent crimes that I was trying to write about, but like my editor and publisher, they're like, we don't think you can go there. We don't think you can go that dark. I don't know. But in the town where I graduated from high school, the FBI got involved in this case. This woman, they had pictures of her in a cage, and they found out that these two men they had filmed all this. They had eviscerated her, murdered her, and they had packaged meat in the freezer, labeled with the dates like you would hamburger, and it was this girl's remains. And supposedly they were selling human flesh on the dark web, was what the whole thing was shaking out to be. And I was
my God.
right about that. And they're like, "We don't think you should be writing about cannibalism." I'm like, "Oh, they weren't cannibals. They were selling.
They were doing it themselves
on the dark web." Yeah, that's better.
They were profiteers. They weren't cannibals.
They were business.
They were business people. Exactly.
Yes, but I was like, what about Hannibal Lecter? I mean, he was a cannibal and everybody loved him. It's like,
Yeah.
why can't we write about something like this? But maybe in the future. Yeah, I'll find
Yeah.
use.
Maybe make a short story.
Yeah.
Fly under the radar.
Really creepy. Yeah. Wow. Do your own books ever give you nightmares?
No, not at all. And it's funny. I feel kind of bad when people ask me about that. Like, how is it like delving into all these dark crimes and writing about all this dark stuff? And honestly, it's like my mind is already like that. So, writing about it doesn't really make it worse because I dwell on it anyway. And it's kind of been a weird experience since I started writing these books and going to book clubs and things, because people expect me to be like this really dark, scary, brooding person, I think. And I show up and they're like, "You're so nice. Like, you're friendly." And they're like, "We would not expect you to be writing this.
You're outgoing."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's been a funny thing. Yeah.
Well, tell us about the latest book that's going to be coming out.
Yes, Safe and Sound. So again, I'm writing about families here, and there are two sisters who are very close, and their older cousin vanishes from their house while she's babysitting them overnight and leaves some blood behind, and they don't know what has happened to her. And their cousin was the first one in their family who was going to make it, like really go to college and escape this dead end town. So they really looked up to her. And then, when that didn't happen, now they're trying to get out of town on their own. And they're kind of something comes up, they're trying to find out what really happened to their cousin. So it's a lot about, women in these small towns without a lot of opportunities that still want to do something with their lives. And it can be really hard to break out of that, like generational poverty or, just growing up in these rural areas where there's not a lot of options.
Oh my gosh. So does your family still live in the Ozarks? And do you still live there?
I live just on the edge, like I'm on the northern side of it. So I live in it like a college town now. So I'm not still down there, but I do go down. I still have friends there and people down. Oh yeah. And they actually like the books. You worry about that kind of thing, how they would feel about this, because I've had people who don't live in the Ozarks, but people who live in Missouri, like get really angry at me. And they think I'm giving them like a bad reputation because I'm writing these crime stories. But what I always like to bring up is that almost all of my books, they're inspired by real crimes that actually happened here.
Right.
In this area. And the crimes are always worse than what I write about. And so I have a hard time with that when people get upset about that. So maybe you should be upset about the actual crimes that are happening.
Right. Instead of my
not fiction.
Yeah.
Story
No,
that
that's
I'm
really
writing.
interesting. And I mean, I'm sure somebody could really analyze that and try to figure out why they think that's an example of their behavior.
Yes, and it is funny. Yeah, I did do one reading down in the Ozarks with Weight of Blood, and someone raised their hand in the Q&A, and they're like, "I think you're writing about my uncle." And I'm thinking, does your uncle have a woman in a cage in his trailer? Because maybe you should tell someone about that.
Wow.
Or it's interesting the things that people say or recognize like in a story.
That is, yeah. I mean, did you delve any further into that question? I mean, I would have been like, what part of that?
I know, like if there's criminal activity involved, go tell the police, someone aside from me, because I can't do much about it. But yeah, maybe you should talk to somebody.
Oh my goodness gracious. That's very interesting.
When does Safe and Sound come out? I forgot.
It comes out April 23rd.
Yeah. Just around the corner.
Yeah, I read it a couple of months ago and wow, it's a good story, and the dynamic of the cousins and the girl and all, it's just fantastic. So I'd recommend everybody pick up a copy and you will enjoy it. And so what are you working on now? What's obviously this one's in the can, so too late to pull it back. So what are you working on now?
Yeah, I have a new contract for 2 more books. So I'm working on book, I guess it's 6 now. So
awesome.
I'm almost done with that. It's due like right after Safe and Sound comes out. So I'm excited about that one. And it's, again, you're back out in the woods, middle of nowhere, by the National Forest out there where nobody lives out there. So yeah, you can expect the same sort of dark creepiness from me and family, all the family secrets. Yeah.
And also based on a true event to some degree.
A little bit. Yeah. Yes. It's actually combining a couple of real stories, including one, a boy in my high school who was a year below me when it happened. He shot and he killed all of his brothers and sisters one night while his parents were out at a dance. So that plays into it a bit.
I think that's a good point. That you combined a couple of things. A lot of people will have a story that they will base on a true crime, and then they find it difficult to pull away from that. That they think, well, this is real. So I got to pay homage to the real. No, you don't.
Right.
So, did you have issues with that? I mean, saying, well, that didn't happen that way. Oh, never mind. This is my story. Yeah.
Yeah. And like what I do generally, I'm trying to find like that most intriguing little kernel of the crime, because to me, when I read about all different kinds of crimes, and if something sticks with me, I'm like, what is it? What is that little element about this one that really got to me? And I try to take that piece and like develop my own story from that. But yeah, you really do have to shed so much of the truth of what really happened, because it's just more of an inspiration, and you're not really writing about that crime.
And
where do you search for crime stories?
Oh, I'm sorry. What was that? Where do I start?
Yeah, where do you search for crime stories? I mean, do you have blogs and places and newspapers and feeds that you go to all the time, and or is it just happen because it happens?
Yeah, I mean, I follow the news in the small towns from where I live, and there's just like endless And I mean, it's sad, but
Wow.
a lot of crimes and a lot of really creepy ones as well. I think a lot of rural crimes tend to be almost creepier and stranger. So it's pretty easy to find things. And of course, people like on Facebook, I have all my friends from the places I used to live, they know what I do and they'll send me things. They're like, did you
Yeah.
see this? Did you see what happened?
Yeah.
And I'm, tell me all about it.
What do you think it is about that environment that seems to inspire such awful crimes?
Well, I mean, part of it, it's easy to hide. You could do something
Mhm.
out in the middle of nowhere. There's nobody around. Nobody's going to see you. Nobody's going to hear somebody screaming. Nobody's going to find a body out on your 40 acres of land, you know, and a lot of neighbors like respect, like I would not come on your property. I would not ask you questions. And people just, you know, they look the other way. It's like they mind their own business, like they're being good neighbors. They're just minding their business.
Right.
And I think that environment makes it a little bit easier if you want to do something and get away with it. Nobody's going to see you out there.
And I guess the other side of that is a horrible crime that happens in a small community is more impactful on the community, and so it's more likely to spread like wildfire. Whereas if it happens in Detroit or New York or Miami, it's like ho hum, it's page 30, you know, in the newspaper, and it's a little thing, and people just roll on by.
Oh yeah, everybody talks about it in a small town and everybody is either somewhat related to someone, either the criminal or the victim or, you
Oh,
know,
wow.
someone and their family's married to them. It's just, there's so many interconnections that you're right. It makes it very impactful for an entire community.
Well, our friend John Saul was famously said,
Yeah.
the horror writer, he famously said he sets his stories in small towns because the cops are stupid. Now, what he really meant is they're not sophisticated. They don't have the budget. They don't have all that. Plus, the town is less sophisticated and it's more cohesive and it's more impactful. And I think that's what he was. In other words, a horror story that takes place in a small town is much more horror, and a crime is much more crime. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like in some of the small towns, it's like the sheriff's related to a bunch of people.
Right.
I'm not saying all small town cops
No.
are crooked because they're not at all, but things happen, you know, and people talk. It's like, oh yeah, the sheriff's cousin did this and he did not get picked up for it, that kind of thing. So
No, and
yeah.
I think often too, I mean, you know, when you love somebody or you live in a small town, you've known these people since they were born, you don't want to think that they would do something horrible. It's not even that, you know, they're corrupt. It's just they don't want to believe it. I mean,
Right.
it's hard to
Yeah.
accept.
There's a certain loyalty, you know,
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
known all your life. And yeah, like you said, yeah, you don't want to believe it sometimes.
And the social blowback, even for the chief of police, can be huge.
Oh,
And so you got to walk carefully into this little world, because you can really step on some toes and create a mess for yourself. And so, sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait for the next one. And can you tell us where you can get all of your books?
Yes, I mean, I think your local indie, you can get them there or ask for it if they don't have it. But pretty much everywhere books are sold, your favorite online retailer or wherever. And if you want signed copies, my local Skylark bookshop in Columbia can be ordered from there. So,
Very cool. Okay, Skylark Bookshop. Let's give them a plug in Columbia. Laura McHugh, it's been fabulous to have you. We've got to have you back on. I mean, every book that you have come out, we've got to have you come back on and talk about it.
I would
Because
love
you're fascinating and I love your mind.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Laura. Thank you so much. And we will have you back. And good luck with the new book. I mean, it's as good as the others. I think it's going to do very well and scare a lot of people.
I hope so.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Exactly.
And I want to ask our viewers to click the thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm and gets the interviews out. And please subscribe so we can bring more interviews to you. And also check out www.outlierswritinguniversity.com. If you have any inclination to learn how to write or you want to check it out, go to the website and there will be a lot of information there for you.
All right. So we're saying goodbye. This has been Get to Know on the Outliers YouTube channel. And until next time, we'll see you then.
See you soon.